All right, so um this is my first attempt at doing a live stream on on YouTube and whatnot. So it's pretty interesting. Let me see how this goes. But what this is for me as well is kind of like a practice, practice run, right? Anticipating being able to do this before a larger audience and whatnot. So this is this is some research that I did a few years ago, and I got to essentially, basically, I'm just refreshing my understanding on my own research. But the title of this presentation is called Exodus Historical Fiction. I'm also going through this just to see what I can add to it to make it better, and to make it more relevant, and to add information that I've learned since uh, initially creating this presentation. I initially created this presentation, I think maybe 3 years ago. Like it was a minute. It's been a minute. Um, there's a little bit of history behind it and whatnot, and the reason why I created the presentation. Uh, Not really going to go into that. Well, no, I created the presentation due to me really coming across for the very first time these Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters, and then and so the happy birthday joint. And so after that, it was, to me, it was such a great, such a well researched presentation that I thought I could take it other places. I tried to do that, it didn't happen, and that's just the way it goes. So now I'm going through it again. I'm gonna go through this presentation again, um, to kind of go, kind of get the feel of it. I know the gist of the information, that of course is inside of it, but it's been a long time, and then when you don't revisit things, things become misty and hazy back in your mind. So I'm going to just revisit it. It's crucial, it's relevant, because the information is good. It's true factual information, or at the very least it's up to date and current on what the research in the field suggests. And so let's get into it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so let me go ahead and check this out, see how it looks. All right, let's see. Let's see. Yeah. Let me see how all this looks. Okay. Boom. Here we go. All right. So I started the presentation off like this, but this is from the teachings of Mary Kare, right? King Mary Kare. But as concerns the foreigners, let this be said: the vile Asiatic is miserable because of the place he is in, shortage of water, lack of trees, and the path thereof difficult because of the mountains. He has never settled in one place, but plagued by want, he wanders the deserts on foot. He has been fighting ever since the time of Horus. He neither conquers nor can he be conquered. He does not announce the day of fighting, but is like a thief whom society has expelled. Right? So, what is he talking about here? He is talking about a group of people who are using guerrilla warfare tactics against, or have used guerrilla warfare tactics against the Egyptian state. And so this is what he's talking about, right? The Asiatic, short of water, lack of many trees, paths thereof difficult because of the mountainous regions within the Canaanite area. Later on in the presentation, we're going to go through and visit some of those mountainous regions. He has never settled in one place, meaning he's nomadic. He's a wandering tribe, right? This is the Asiatic that he's talking about, the Asiatic that came into Kemet and conquered, right? Plagued by want, he wanders the deserts on foot. So he's hungry, right? Starving. Because why? Because he is not in a place where he has not figured out how to master his environment. See, the ancient Kemetics, at the very least, we can say they were masters of their environment, right? They had understood where they their science, their way of life forced them, their way of thinking about life forced them to understand the physical dynamics of the place they were in and master it so that they can provide for their people. What he's saying here is these people don't have the sense enough to figure out how to live. And that's what we're witnessing, right? And so, okay, moving on. So this is a list of my sources, where I got this information from. Um, I realized in my presentation I should have matched source for source information for information. Um, I can get around to doing that, but this is a very long presentation, and so that may or may not happen. Just to be honest with you. All right. So some more information, more, books and journal articles for you to go ahead and research, in reference to confirming the information that I'm sharing with you here today. All right, here's some different statements, right? Cairo, the 15th of June, 2018. In the era of King Djoser, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Neterket, and founder of the third dynasty in the Old Kingdom, a shortage of the Nile flood in 2700 BC led to a 7-year famine, leaving Egypt in a state of extreme distress. The king was perplexed as grains were insufficient, seeds dried up, people robbed each other, and temples and shrines closed. Looking for an end to his people's suffering, the king consulted his architect and prime minister, Imhotep, commanding him to dig for a solution in the old sacred text. Obeying the king's orders, Imhotep headed to a temple in the ancient city of Ain Shams, Old Heliopolis, where he discovered that the solution could be found in the city of Yebu, Elephantine, the source of the Nile. Imhotep, the architect of the Djoser Pyramid in Saqqara, traveled to Yebu, where he visited the temple of Khnum and saw the granite, precious stones, minerals, and building stones. Khnum, the god of fertility, was believed to have created mankind from clay. After his visit to Yebu, Imhotep updated King Djoser on his journey. On the day following his meeting with Imhotep, Khnum came to the king in his dream, promising to end the famine and allow the Nile to flow again if Djoser restores the temple of Khnum. Consequently, Djoser executed Khnum's wishes, allocating the revenue of the area from Elephantine to Khnum Temple. Shortly afterwards, the famine and the people's suffering came to an end. So we this is a particular Kemetic story that comes off the walls of Kemet. You'll have to give me some time. I'm gonna go ahead and research that. I know this where this stele is. This is called the famine stele. I believe this is called the famine stele. Let me go ahead and research that and put that boom right in the presentation, to update you. But we can see several elements of this story that already matches the Joseph story, right? What do we have? We have a 7-year famine, right? The 7-year famine is what's in the Bible. What do we have? We have an advisor to the king, an advisor to the king giving solutions. what do we have? We have dream interpretation. We have the deity, the creator deity coming down and promising. Creator deity promises to help with the famine if something is done. Right? The elements of the Joseph story right here, boom, in your face. So that's very interesting as well. All right, what did I call this? Exodus, fantastic fairy tales of a foreign father that's flatly false, right? So we got Moses and the false nature of the Exodus. This is the outline of the presentation, right? Moses and the false nature of the Exodus, theories of Moses and Hebrew origins, the importance of the Amarna letters and the wretched of the desert. The Israelites are simply Canaanites that chose to be theologically, I should put theologically different. Polytheism and the mother goddess tradition, Egypt, the land of the new home of the Jew, and biblical plagiarism, right? So these are several things that I'm gonna go over in this presentation, depending on time. So let's see here. All right. So here are some quotes from some scholars. Source right on the page. In general, no serious archaeologist believes today that the events described in the book of Joshua have any accurate basis. And we'll see why it doesn't have accurate basis, because if the Exodus didn't happen, Joshua didn't happen. Boom, bam, bada bing, bada boom. Right? Archaeological surveys in the early 1990s, in particular, showed that the Israelite culture emerged in the central hills of the country in continuity with Canaanite culture of the previous period. So the Israelites are simply Canaanites. We'll look at that a little bit more to see what's up with that. How does that make any sense? But that does make sense when you even think about the biblical narrative and who this the confederacy of David and Solomon was. So let's move forward, right? The departure from Egypt, known as the Exodus, that was Pierre. Former quote was from Pierre de Mirosegi, an archaeologist and director of the research of. I got to figure out what CNRS is. I just pulled that. The Center for New Research. I don't know. I'll figure that out. All right. The departure from Egypt, known as the Exodus, is an essential vicissitude of this story. We almost forget one fundamental fact. Nothing in the present state of Egyptian literature, more or less contemporary with these events, confirms this story or even alluded only fleetingly to one of the episodes where some characters are mentioned. That's Elaine Zivi, Egyptologist, Director of Research at the Center for National. Oh, there we go. That's the name right there. Ha! That's hella funny. The Center for the National Research of Scientists. Right. And then here's another one by Richard Lebeau, Egyptologist, historian of religion of the ancient Near East. Most historians take the biblical text of the conquest of Canaan for a pious legend, a reinterpretation of ideological and theological origins of Israel. These cities are, according to the Bible, heavily fortified, but archaeological excavations reveal otherwise. So today, excavations of Canaanite cities and reading of tablets from Tel El Amarna show that the victories of Joshua took place only on paper. To conclude, there has been no mass exodus from Egypt. If no mass exodus from Egypt, no conquering of Canaan. Canaan was not conquered by violence. That's what it is. These revisionist tales of the Exodus history don't take into account how that destroys the biblical narrative of the Exodus, right? Of the biblical narrative of Moses, right? Because if you don't have the Exodus, you don't have the 5 books of Moses being written by Moses. So then you have to look at what is going on. This is not a factually true book. Now, it can be a compiled book trying to relate through myth, history, but it's not a history book. That's not what it is. All right, this is by Israel Finkelstein. Modern archaeology has shown that the concept of archives kept in Jerusalem with writings of the 10th century is an absurdity based on a biblical witness and not on factual evidence. Bible stories would rank, therefore, among national mythologies and would have no more historical foundation than the Homeric saga of Ulysses or that of Aeneas, founder of Rome, sung by Virgil. National mythology. National mythology. Not history, but mythology. All right, here we go with the biblical Exodus, right? Some of the points that I'm going to make here is some Jochebed issues, discussion of inbreeding, numerical family issues, military might, and route issues, right? All right, Jochebed, the changeling, right? I'm went into the Babylonian Talmud, chapter 8, to get this information. It says that Jochebed was born at the gates of Egypt. Jochebed reversed aging from 130 to a suggested young woman able to nurse and have children. It's like the magic show of the Easter Bunny. And then Jochebed married her nephew. All right. So this is what the Babylonian Talmud says. So Jochebed, Moses basically was a child of incest. Number one, that's what the Bible is saying. Moses was a child of incest. All right. If there should be a daughter from a son, we would not say a word. They were upright in that each only married him who was respectable and fit for them. Eleazar, Jacob taught even the youngest of them was not less than 40 years of age when she married. Is that so? Did not our Hesida say if a woman marries at least at less than 20 years of age, she bears children until 60? After 20 years, she bears until 40. But when she marries after 40, she does not then bear children because they were upright. A miracle happened to them. As to Jochebed, the mother of Moses, as it is written, and there went a man of the house of Levi and took a daughter of Levi. Is it possible that a woman of 130 years of age should be named daughter? Has Arhama B. Hania said, this meant Jochebed, whose mother was pregnant while on the road to Egypt, and she was born before the walls when they arrived in Egypt, as it is written. Numbers, book 24, verse 59. Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, whom her mother bore to Levi in Egypt. Ooh, so the Jochebed in Numbers. There we go. Let me write that. I mean, it's on the screen. I got it. It's in my archives or whatever. 26. But I'm gonna have to go ahead and put that in a different space in the presentation. Because it says, let's look at that again. Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, whom her mother bore to Levi in Egypt. And why is she named daughter? Said R. Yehuda B. Zebediah. Infer from this that signs of youth returned to her. The wrinkles disappeared and complexion became improved. Whatever, man. These people be really trying it and trying to justify the stories of the Bible. It's the wildest information. Whatever, bro. All right. So let's look at this, right? Let's just really take a look at this. Joseph, Numbers 26:59. Joseph allowed his brothers to come into Egypt. Jacob took his son Levi into Egypt, and Levi had a son Kohath. And within the first year of being there, Levi had a daughter, Jochebed, according to Numbers 26:59 and Exodus 6:20. Now, as for Kohath, Kohath had Amram, right? And we don't know their ages, but Amram married Jochebed when she was 120 years old. Now, Jochebed was born the first year the Hebrews were in Kemet. So the Jews at that point had been there for 120 years. This is the traditional wisdom, although not Bible, but Babylonian Talmud, right? So this is Babylonian Talmud, this is biblical and Talmudic information, right? Because we have Jochebed, being born to Levi as his daughter, right? And then Amram, who would have been Jochebed's nephew, marries Jochebed, right? Amram marries and gets with Jochebed, right? And then has Moses. Now, the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed. Now, according to Numbers 26:59, the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, a descendant of Levi, who was born to the Levites in Egypt. To Amram, she bore Aaron, Moses, and their sister Miriam. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses. Amram lived for 137 years. Now, interestingly enough, this represents a form of incest that it would prevent growth in the number of Israelites if this was provided as an example of a norm. So here's the tree, right? I should probably quote the website I screenshot this from, but this is the tree, right? I didn't make this up. This isn't my tree, you know. So here we go with Levi had Gershon, Jochebed, Kohath, and Merari, right? Kohath had Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uziel, who then had all these other people, right? Izhar had these people. Hebron had nobody. But then Amram had Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, right? And then Aaron had all these groups of people down to Phinehas, but Amram had Moses. Now notice here that there is no mention of who was Amram's wife, but you had to do this line to say it was Jochebed, the auntie. Amram got busy with his auntie. Okay, so Moses, a child of incest. Now Moses was born 10 years later. So now Jochebed was 130 when she begot Moses. And Moses was 40 years old when he fled Egypt, according to Acts, and came to Pharaoh when he was 80 to free the Hebrews, and 120 when he died. So there's these interesting 40 years. So this means that the Hebrews were liberated about 80 years after Moses was born, and 210 years after the Hebrews went into Egypt. Also, according to the text, 70 members of Jacob's family went into Egypt, and 603,000 Hebrews left. Absolute madness. There's so much madness going on here. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense whatsoever. The Exodus is crazy. Everybody is telling us it's 400 years. The Bible, in and of itself, if you look into it, is telling us it's 200 years. It's not making any sense. None whatsoever, right? And then the 18th dynasty argument, the any other dynasty argument, it's not making sense. It's just not adding up. It's not adding up, right? So 400 years did not pass between the Hebrews coming into Kemet and the birth, conversion, realization, exodus of Moses. According to the biblical text, only 2 to 3 generations had passed between entering and exiting of Kemet. All right, so what I can see here, which is a weakness in this presentation, is what was Jochebed's age? What was Jochebed's age? So we have Levi, Kohath, and Amram. So how old was Kohath? How old was Kohath when he had Amram? That's what we need to know. How old was Levi when he had Kohath? I don't know if the Bible will give those ages. That's a little bit specific. But at the very least, we can say that Jochebed was 60, 70 years old. See, but if we do that, that takes years off of the time that the Hebrews were in Egypt. So I should probably make a slide with those numbers. Yeah, I'll make a slide with those numbers because it doesn't really matter if Jochebed wasn't 120. She could be younger. The younger she is, the less time that the Hebrews are in Egypt. Boom. All good. All right, compared to other civilizations at the time, if 600,000 people would have left, it would have made Israel a true superpower. Ancient historians suggest that Egypt population was between. So I got to get a source for. Source for Egypt's population. And put that on the screen. Ancient historians suggest Egypt's population between 3 to 4 million. Egyptian domination over Israel is hard to explain if the enslaved people nearly outnumbered their masters and could field an army rivaling that of any on earth. The Persian army of Xerxes likely had around 200,000 actual soldiers, while Israel's hated enemy, the warlike Assyrians, likely had between 100,000 and 150,000 troops. I mean, and we're really talking some serious numbers here. A nation boasting of more than 500,000 fighting men would have been invincible, right? And what I mean, come on, and what type of mass media campaign would the Kemites have to have done in order to convince so many people to have lived in abject poverty and slavery? Doesn't make any sense, right? Doesn't make any sense. All right, so 600,000 men over 20 to 50. Let's be conservative. Let's give them 600,000 women. That's 12. And although we know traditionally women are 2 to 1, all people under 20, let's say 300,000. Old men and women over 50, let's say 200,000. All right, so that's that. 1.7 million from 70 people in 210 years. So that's 210 years. Take 50 years off of that. Now we're dealing with 160. Makes no absolute effing sense. None whatsoever. It did not happen. Let's be clear. Let us be clear. From the text itself, not outside sources, from the text itself, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. Just cannot happen rationally. But in order to be a Bible believer, you have to believe in magic, you know? And then what is that, McDonald's? Do you believe in magic? Because that's the Bible believers. Anyway, that's the way it goes, right? Doesn't make sense. It's not. It's not adding up. 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 All right. So I got a quote where I got this from. All right. So this is out of the biblical text itself. Dang, I really need to quote this. All right, I got this from a space, but I need to quote where I got it from. But this is basically saying the population of Egypt, right? The pre-dynastic period, 350,000. Old Kingdom, 1.5. Middle Kingdom, 2 million. New Kingdom, 5. Late period, 7. I mean, come on, man. These numbers, and so we're talking about conservatively 1.7 million people leaving out of there. It would have killed the Kemites. It would have destroyed them. And during the Old Kingdom, that's their entire population. That's their entire, so it didn't happen during the Old Kingdom. During the Middle Kingdom, that's dang near their entire population. Now, during the New Kingdom, that is a portion of their population. Come on now, let's be serious. It didn't happen the way it's described. The worst cow and horse, I gotta get rid of that word. Oh man, wow, yeah. I really gotta get rid of that word. All right. Wow. Okay. I'm just gonna skip over that. Dang, I really did put that in there. All right. And I still have it up. Wow. Okay, I'm just gonna. Now, that was a good one though. I gotta go back and take out that word. All right. Yeah, it's just me being silly. All right, now let's look at one of the theories that they use to justify the Exodus. This is Akhenaten as Moses by Ahmed Asman. Who was Akhenaten and what did he do? All right. Akhenaten, Aten, and the sun disk. Yahweh represented as the sun in earlier Mesopotamian motifs. Right? Akhenaten was a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. His role and importance in Kemetic history is debated. Some call him a great philosopher, others call him a traitor to the Kemetic nation. I'm more or less leaning towards traitor, honestly. One thing is for sure, he is credited with being the world's first monotheist. In his religion, he promoted a small divinity in the Kemetic pantheon. So there was the Aten was not new. It was a deity, I think, of the 12th nome at that time, and he promoted it to supremacy. Akhenaten, he went on a campaign to erase the different deities that the Kemites worshipped and replaced them with Aten. He did his best to demolish the temples of Amen, a major deity and patron of the ruling family. The rulers before him carried the name of Amen, Amenhotep I, the second, third, and for a while he was the fourth. That was until he decided to enact his plan of destabilization and decentralization of the Kemetic government. His family was the family that took Kemet back from the Hyksos invaders. They then went on a campaign to expand the Kemetic Empire into the Levant to make sure that the people of the surrounding countries could not attack again. Right? So let's look at the whole region. This is what we're looking at when we're dealing with the Canaanite Sinai Peninsula area, right? We got Avaris, which is popular. Then we have, this is a modern map to a degree, because we see Gaza. I don't know, but maybe it's not. So we have Avaris, we have Gaza, we have Tyre, we have Sidon, we have Byblos, all up in there, Kadesh, Damascus, right? That's that Jewish, Hebrew, Israelite, promised land joint, which is the northern part of Arabia, honestly, tell you the truth. It's really kind of weird when you're looking at it. But all right. The city of the sun, the city of Het Kapata, Memphis, whatnot. So what's the theory? Very complex theory, right? Moses, Ahmed Osman's complete theory, right? Abraham and Sarai. Tutmosis III married Sarah and had sex, right? Gave Sarah back to Abraham after impregnating her. And so, all right, so that's that, right? And the couple goes back to Mesopotamia. The child of this union was Isaac, thus making Isaac a pharaoh of Kemet. When Isaac, the illegitimate pharaoh of Egypt, died, he was going to pass his birthright to Esau, who sold it to Jacob, who passed it to his son Joseph. Tutmosis IV appointed Joseph, who was Yuya. Okay, so go over Yuya and Thuya's history. As Vizier invited Joseph's family into Kemet. Joseph and his wife continued to serve Amenhotep III, who married their daughter T. All of T's children served on the throne until Horemheb. Horemheb put the Jews to work building different cities. Jews then, after suffering Kemet for 4 generations, fled Kemet under Ramses. So this is his theory. All right. This is what he says. It may be helpful at this point to show how this chronology accords with that arrived at, though a different approach, in Stranger in the Valley of the Kings, which sought to establish that Joseph the patriarch was the same person as Yuya, the vizier. Therefore, I argued that Joseph Yuya arrived in Egypt as a slave during the reign of Amenhotep II, and after his spell of service in the household of Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard, followed by his imprisonment on a false charge of adultery, was eventually released and appointed vizier by Tutmosis, who was a dreamer like Joseph himself. Once in office, he brought the tribe of Israel down from Canaan to join him in Egypt, where they settled at the Goshen in the eastern delta. Crap. All right. So, let me see. Why did I do this? I don't remember. So, looking at the timeline, right, we can see that the first flaw, according to the biblical text itself, the Jews were only in Egypt for 210 years. Looking at the Bible itself, So the first table, which says the length of the sojourn was 430 years, is off in that respect, right? So this is Jan Assman's table itself, right? Just looking at Jan Assman. So he said Joseph was in prison for 2 years, good years before the famine, 7. The time when the Israelites came into Egypt, 2. The length of the sojourn, 441 years, right? So then he tries to correlate it with the rule of the Hyksos, 108 years. The length of the Egyptian dynasty, 240. The reigns of the first 4 kings, Ramses, Seti, Ramses II, and Meripatah, the 19th dynasty. Again, 441 years, right? Magical mathematics. That's what I'm going to call this, magical mathematics. Magical math. Yuya came into Egypt. Oh, the wives. These are the wives of Amenhotep. Oh, okay. I get why I put this in here. Yuya came into Egypt as part of a deal of Tutmosis IV with King Artatama to make an alliance with the rising power of the Hittite kingdom of the north. Yuya's mission was to get close to the throne of Kemet and place an Asiatic heir on the throne to weaken Kemetic rule in Palestine. Right? So let's look at Yuya, the Asiatic visor. Right? Oh man, I need to get this book off the shelf, but I'll get to it. Right? Yuya, the Asiatic visor to Tutmosis IV, the dreamer king, was Joseph. This is Asman's thing. Yuya married Thuya and then had a daughter T. Tutmosis IV was succeeded by Amenhotep III, who was 12 when he became pharaoh. He then, after marrying his sister Sidamun, when T was only 8. T is the mother of Akhenaten, who is Moses, according to Jan Assman. So this is the so-called visor. This is the not so-called. This is the visor Yuya. This is Amenhotep III, who just loved white women, right? This is Queen T. Right? Here goes the half Asiatic Akhenaten. This is Akhenaten's lineage. Oh, dude, I should do a lineage tree for Akhenaten. All right. So let's look at his theory. Pharaoh had sex with a random migrant foreigner, impregnated her and the royal family, and let her walk out of Egypt. That doesn't make any sense. The Egyptian royalty was very particular about who they could lay with. That's why they were doing this incest thing. Also, if Pharaoh had taken an immigrant to be a wife as part of the harem, then the husband would have definitely had to been taken care of. Egyptian royalty in the deserts of Mesopotamia. Egypt was the political powerhouse of the ancient world. There's no way a random nomad would have the heir to the throne unprotected in the desert. Right, here's a sample of Yuya and his wife standing behind him, faces Osiris. His white wig shows him to be an old man. The text reads, adoring Osiris, kissing the ground before Unefer. Said by the divine father of the Lord of the two lands, the favor of the good god Yuya. This is from the Book of the Dead in Yuya's tomb. All right. All right, so Akhenaten was born in year 11 or 12 of his father. Akhenaten fell from power, fled to the Sinai Desert. This is the theory. In 1361, at the age of 34, 35, if Akhenaten was Moses, he would have been around 60 when he returned to Egypt and led the Exodus in the reign of Ramses I. Whether or not Akhenaten lost his life at the time he fell from power, nobody really knows, right? So, what was the strategy? Take a little known but known deity, the Aten, elevate it to national supremacy, destroy the culture of the people by causing social chaos, which is what he did, closing the temples that were the lifeblood of the community, confiscating the resources of the temples that went to help the people in the community, introducing an alien way to understand divinity on the populace. Move the capital from northern Kemet to upper Kemet. I gotta fix that. Ignore the political reality of Kemetic outposts in the Levant Mesopotamian area, right? That's the destabilization campaign and strategy of Akhenaten. So, this is from the Manetho story, right? The story of Osarseph is known from two long quotations from the Egyptica, a history of Egypt by the Egyptian historian Manetho and Josephus against Apion. The first is Manetho's account of the expulsion of the Hyksos and their settlement in Judea, where they founded the city of Jerusalem. Josephus then draws the conclusion that Manetho's Hyksos were the Jews of the Exodus, although Manetho himself makes no such connection. All right. The second, said some 200 years later, tells the story of Osarseph. According to Josephus, Manetho described Osarseph as a tyrannical high priest of Osiris at Heliopolis. Pharaoh Amenhotep had a desire to see the gods, but in order to do so, he first had to cleanse Egypt of lepers and other polluted people, setting 80,000 of them to work on the stone quarries and then confining them to Avaris. Avaris. We got to know that Avaris is very important. The former Hyksos capital in the eastern delta. Then Osarseph became their leader and ordered them to give up the worship of the gods and eat the meat of the holy animals. The Osariphites then invited the Hyksos back into Egypt and together with their new allies drove Amenhotep and his son Ramses into exile in Nubia and instituted a 13 reign of religious oppression. Towns and temples were devastated, the images of the gods destroyed, the sanctuaries turned into kitchens, and the sacred animals roasted over fires, until eventually Amenhotep Ramses returned to expel the lepers and the Hyksos and restore the old Egyptian religion. Towards the end of the story, Manetho reports that Osiris took the name Moses. All right. Moses and Akhenaten, the BS and the possibility. There is no evidence of any exodus being associated with Akhenaten. We can only guess that the priests and their families that were with Akhenaten were driven out of Kemet. Once again, the Jewish narrative shows no evidence of having direct Egyptian influence. There would have been mentioned at least one Egyptian god by name. The Exodus enslavement narrative doesn't fit Moses had Pharaoh narrative. Once again, another hogwash BS theory based on nothing but imagination. This is Jan Assman's work. Who was Akhenaten? Half Kemetic, half Asiatic destabilizer of the Kemetic people. His grandfather and grandmother are direct descendants of people who have a history of terrorizing Kemet. He ascends to the throne and changes the cultural stability of the nation and causes social, political, and cultural unrest. I may not. All right. So what I need to change this because a lot of cities are named Tel El. That's their modern name. I don't know if that's their old name, but not modern, but the Tel El is kind of interesting, right? According to the Gostra Alstrom in his History of Palestine, page 2, he states that the main god, as heavenly god El, could also have had solar characteristic. In the notes at the bottom of the page, a book is referenced, Ardusat, the mythology of the Phoenicians, on the tablets of Rashama. It says El of Ugarit is depicted sitting on his throne, and above him is winged sun disk. Is the story of the Exodus about the Hyksos? Quite possibly. That would mean that the story is still made up, though, and their origins in that book is still fictional. All right, many editions of the Bible, the Septuagint, the Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Samaritan Pentateuch, In the latest version, there's a conception of a 400-year sojourn. That was not the understanding of the Israelites of the earliest period. So where do we get this sojourn story from, right? Exodus 12, verses 40 through 41. The time that the people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt, right? However, this is from the Samaritan Pentateuch, and it is a comparison between the Samaritan text and the Masoretic text, right? Now, the Samaritan Pentateuch says something very different, right? All right. Samaritan Pentateuch says, Marquette, the greatest Samaritan sage, and after his many Samaritans divided the period 430 equal lengths, 215 years in the land of Canaan and 215 years in the land of Mizraim, right? And the time the sons of Israel and their forefathers dwelt in the land of Canaan and in the land of Mizraim was 430 years. So, in the Samaritan text, it says time of Canaan and is Egypt. But when we get to the Masoretic text, which is a translation, a later translation, they cut that Canaan part out and just said the time that it was in Egypt was 430 years. This is the problem with translations. This is why there's an issue. So in the Samaritan Pentateuch lines up with the Septuagint. This is where we get that 400-year narrative from, and this is the reason for the confusion. When you go back and look at the original document, it lines up with the biblical narrative. What we have in the King James Version and the current versions in the West is utter nonsense. But when we look at the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls, we come up with something different that begins to make more sense. An undefined time in ancient Egypt and an undefined time in Canaan, which adds up to, though, 430 years. So this is where that confusion comes in at, right? This is why it's important to study. It still says that there were some people in ancient Egypt, but it's no 400-year sojourn. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that's all just from the text itself. There's no outside resources that I brought in to really talk about something being different, right? So let's look at the Asiatic presence in Kemet, right? This is Claude Vitterstein, right? He argues that there is no archaeological evidence of the Exodus under Ramses II, and therefore the biblical Exodus under this pharaoh would be a story written after the fact, embellished for posterity, which is the frequent conclusion of specialists. No Exodus. The only historical evidence, which is both archaeologically provable and semantically comparable with the content of these different versions of the expulsion immigration story, is the Hyksos in Egypt. So once again, we're going to the Hyksos story that was covered by Sister Napa earlier. No Exodus, but we do have evidence of Asiatics in Kemet big time, right? So here we go. This reference is to the Eastern Hill country. Will become clear as we look at the geography of the land of mass known as Canaan. Here, there's 37 Asiatics paying tribute to an official in the Eastern lands. If one considers their history, this would be the actions of a conquered group. Now, I was talking with some people before, and people are really strange in their desire to believe wild stories, right? So, in the Bible, they talk about angels coming down and mating with men and creating a race of giants. Okay? I have a conversation with these people, and they say that the ancient Egyptians were giants. And their reasoning is, look at the way they depicted themselves on the walls. And someone actually brought up this stele, right? And it was the most asinine thing I had heard, but it's what people believe. And they fought me tooth and nail on it, right? This is a result of a limited understanding, right? Looking at something in its surface level, right? Not seeing power and status represented in artistic form. The big man is the one that the little people are paying tribute to. That's it. He wasn't larger than them in size, he was larger than them in status. Anyway, but that was the wildest conversation, right? This is the prophecy of Nefertiti. This particular piece of Kemetic history is from the 12th dynasty. It describes the relationship that the Asiatic black man had with the Kemites. Oh, I think I gotta include the prophecy of Nefertiti. So I gotta go through that. Okay. Discuss the prophecy of Nefertiti. Here we go. Amenet the first. Amenet Amenemhet the first. Although the evidence is slight, the prophecy of Nefertiti, a text associated with Amenemhet the first, makes mention of Asiatics. He was concerned for what would happen in the land. He thinks about the condition of the East. Asiatics, Amu, traveled with their swords, terrorizing those who are harvesting, seizing the oxen from the plow. All happiness has gone away. The land is cast down in trouble because of those feeders, those Setiyu, the Asiatics who are throughout the land. Enemies have arisen in the east. The Asiatics, the Amu, have come down to Egypt. The fortress is deprived of another. Besides it, the guard does not pay attention of it. Asiatics, the Amu, will fall to his sword. Libyans will fall to this flame. Rebels to his wrath. Traitors to his might. Has a serpent on his brow subdues the rebels to him. One will build a wall of the ruler, life, prosperity, and health to prevent the Asiatics from going down into Egypt. Lo, the miserable Asiatic, for he is wretched because of the place he has been. Bare of water, lack of food, he's traveled since the time of Horus. That was the warning. This is the why. All right. In this literature, the Asiatics are described as terrorists. They are terrorizing the Kemetic people. Amenet the second, from his annals ones reads number of 90 number of prisoners brought to these foreign lands 1550 Amu has slave tribute from the Levantine rulers 102 Asiatics the Amu, right? So this is a representation of like Kemet trampling over these people. Evidence also points to increasing number of Asiatics within Egypt, large numbers of whom seem to have been in domestic service. In fact, in the Brooklyn Papyrus, almost two-thirds of one household staff have Asiatic names, while other documents contain titles such as officer in charge of the Asiatic troop and scribe of the Asiatics. This document is dated from the 10th years of Amenemhet the third, to year the second of Sobek-Hotep III. Is a record of the Bureau of Labor that shows at this time that there were many Asiatics who were working for the Egyptian masters. Here's the Brooklyn Papyrus, where you can find the names of these Asiatics on it. Some of these foreigners facilitated the collapse of the Middle Kingdom and later conquest of Egypt by the Asiatic Hyksos in the Second Intermediate Period. That's the theory, right? That the Asiatics helped facilitate the collapse of the Middle Kingdom, right? The most important text recounts the efforts of a 13th dynasty Theban noblewoman named Senebtisi to establish legal ownership of 95 household servants, whose names indicate that 45 were of Asiatic origin. As were the custom, some of these foreigners no doubt married Egyptians, adopted Egyptian beliefs and cultural traditions. Others, especially prisoners of war, our descendants of military captives, remain loyal to their Asian heritage. Bunch of Asians coming into Egypt, conquering. From the 12th dynasty, these Amu accounted for between 1/6 to 1/3 of the population of Egypt would be considered Egyptians of Asiatic origin, Hyksos. They are conventionally represented as Egyptians. Many of these Asiatics entered the country as prisoners of war. Others were born in Egypt from Asiatic parents. They were employed in households, on agricultural estates, and in the service of temples. Their presence is evident in lists of household members, especially those of Kahun, so on and so forth, right? The Egyptians accepted the foreign lineage of their neighbors that did not represent them in a derogatory way. Despite records of conflict over the borders, the situation within Egypt marks mutual work and family relations. Descendants of Asiatics were recognized for the contributions were most probably encountered on a daily basis in typical situations, and at the very least by middle to high-ranking individuals within Egypt as far as Abydos. All right. So let's go ahead and recap what's going on. There's a natural land bridge right here, Avaris and Tajaru and Bubastis. They offer this area here is a natural land bridge from Egypt into the Arabian Peninsula, right? These prisoners of war found themselves employed in Kemet. So Northern Asiatics migrated in and came in as a result of war. These prisoners of war found themselves employed in Kemet, where they married amongst the population in their own and integrated into society. As time moved on, because of shortage of food in the desert region, more and more Asiatic crossed the land bridge and increased their population in Egypt. They know exactly who the Hyksos were. They were invading, wandering people from the deserts of Mesopotamia or the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, otherwise known to our ancestors as the Asiatic black man, the Asiatic starving, hungry, unscientific, uncivilized, savage black man. All right. So the Hyksos. All right. What was the language of the Hyksos, or what was their religion? Analysis of their names of 146 allows one to answer these two questions. The native language of the Hyksos would have been Old Canaanite, and they would have worshipped Baal, not Seth, its Egyptian counterpart, because no theophoric name refers to Seth. Right? For example, several names include the term Baal, such as Baal Tuya, Yuya, and Thuya. Remember that? Or Abi Baal. This is particularly evident among the names of the Hyksos rulers. Moses, I gotta get this. I gotta get this source there. But we got the Hyksos Sakar El. We have the name El. Apur Bar, Hyksos Apur Anati, Yakub El. We got the Yakub here. We got Yakub Bal. These are several rulers within Egypt, right? And here are their names mostly represented by uniliteral glyphs. This is probably because the Egyptians had trouble pronouncing the names. Here is, I think, a biliteral here. Here's a uniliteral here. This is a biliteral. So number 5 is Yakub. Interesting. All right. So interesting that the names of these. All right. In the Temple of Amun, a column to the north and the eastern portal contains a short list of 4 names. This abnormally short list is composed of at least 3 unknown names out of 4. The translation of the lists, according to conventional reading, is as follows. The names of those gods. If the names are those of gods and place names, right? The land of the Shashu after Ma'at. The land of the Shashu, those of Yahu. The land of the Shashu, showing respect to Baal, Ba'at, and then Ba'eth, Anat, the house of Anat. So like Beth El. In the tomb of Anin, brother-in-law of the king Amenhotep III, Shashu are pictured as one of the 9 traditional enemies of Egypt. The Shingar, the Shinar land, the Kush, the Irene people, the Arame, the Keftiu, the Awentisiu, the tent dwellers of Nubia, the Tenu, and the Bedouin of the sun. And number 9, the Shashu of Retenu, right? So this in blue are the Shashu, traditional enemies of Kemet. Notice the Israelite names of these cities. So here's Hormeb with the Nubian captives. Seti I returning to Egypt with Shashu captives. The inscription to the right, which contains the tetragram, is easy to decipher. Indeed, it's just taking an elementary grammar of Egyptian to transcribe the sentence into hieroglyphs. Yeah, it's pretty okay. So it's composed of uniliterals and biliterals. U sha the u shu shata u shu shata u uwa hey. Oh, yeah. The land of the Sashu of Yahweh. Seti returns with Hittites. Boom, boom, boom. This is more information about the Shashu being nomadic rulers and whatnot, right? Haparu and Abaru. So these are some Asiatics that were living in Palestine. Notice the tassels that are on them, right? The difference in the clothing. The Palestinians, those living in Israel, they have the tassels, right? Notice the color that they represent them as. These are not black people, first of all, right? The earliest, the Shashu who have the fringes, that's what they call them. The Shashu who have the fringes, they are not black people. That the Egyptians don't represent them as anything. I mean, they could be some, some mulattoes, some deep mulattoes. I'll give them that, but they look like Greeks when I look at them with the dark, representation of Greeks. All right, here is a Israel's laid waste. This is from the Meripatah Stele, Ashkelon. So let's recap. Right, there's a small strip of land in northern Egypt that connects Egypt to Mesopotamia and Assyria. This natural land bridge was used by wandering tribes to populate, migrate, invade, and settle in the northern area of Egypt. The relationship of the Kemites to these people varied from being at war to being in times of peace. At one point, a large number of these people came into the country, and with the help of offspring of the people coming through capture or assimilation, took over the northern part of Kemet. So, who are the ancient Hebrews? Jew comes from the Hebrew Yehudi, meaning worshiper of one God. In ancient times, many attempts to link them with the Apru, the Habru, the Shashu. Many of these references come from the Amarna letters written to Akhenaten and Pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. The earliest known reference to the Shashu occurs in 15th century BCE list of peoples of the Transjordan region. The Shashu of Seir, the Shashu of Reuben, the Shashu of Shemet, the Shashu of Weber, and the Shashu of Yahweh, the Shashu of Piceps. Right? So we have two things, the Shashu of Reuben, or Ribbon, or Riban, and the Shashu of Yahweh. Right? Here is a representation of the Yahoo in the land of the nomads. I think this is the Meritopus, the princes. Yeah, this is Meripatah Stele. Merenpatah Stele. The princes are prostrate, saying peace. Not one is raising his head among the 9 bows, as referring to Nubia. Now that the Tenhu, Libya has come to ruin, Haiti is pacified. The Canaan has been plundered into every sort of woe. Ashkelon has been overcome. Gezer has been conquered. Yenoam has been made non-existent. Israel is laid to waste, and his seed is not. The most interesting reference to the Apru appears in the early 14th century. Armana correspondence from Egypt. These clay tablets found in the royal city of the Pharaoh of Akhenaten include many letters sent by Canaanite rulers to the Egyptian court. These rulers often complain of their Egyptian overlord about raiding Habru and plead for contingents of the Egyptian archers to help defend against these marauders. So what's really being said at this point is that the historical record does not support the history of Judges and what happened to the Israelites after the so-called Exodus. The land of Palestine at that time was ruled by Egypt, and there's no mention of Egyptian rule of the Bible in Palestine during Joshua's conquest. Instead, what we see All right, here are all the areas in which the Amarna letters are found, right? And here are the Amarna letters that mention possible Hebrews, all of the Amarna letters, right? The Amarna letters 271, EA 271, right? Talks about the Aparu, right? They're basically, when a tablet from the king arrived, the land that the Aparu had taken from the king. These Aparu are guerrilla warfare type people, right? This is what these letters are talking about. The guerrilla warfare people, freedom fighters in their own land, because they're fighting against the Egyptians. They're freedom fighters, just to be honest, right? There is Egyptian military might conquering the land, and they're fighting for their freedom. So in each letter, the Habru are at war with these Kemetic outposts and taking them over. Akhenaten at this time is busy upsetting the Kemetic social order by changing the national religion of Kemet from recognizing Amen to elevating Aten, also changing the capital from Thebes to Tel El Armana. So we really have some really smart warfare going on here, right? We have an intense plan, right? So Akhenaten destabilizes Egyptian government, ignores the political turmoil happening in the land of Canaan, while these freedom fighters are now trying to disrupt the political stability of the Kemetic Empire in Northern Arabia or in Canaan. So that's why I call Akhenaten a traitor. So Akhenaten moved the capital to Armana from Thebes, right? Moved the capital, which upset the region. All right, so we have Habru soldiers within this Tukani prison from Anatolia. Like we have evidence of the Habru. Right, once again, here's the areas of Habru activity. Habru is a term used in the second millennium text throughout the Fertile Crescent for people variously described as rebels, outlaws, raiders, mercenary, servants, slaves, and laborers. This is probably who the Hebrews were. The Shashu are mentioned in several Egyptian inscriptions from the late Bronze Age cannot be seen as an ethnic group. The word means wanderer. Shashu is thus an Egyptian term from the nomads of Palestine, Transjordan, and Syria. The Akkadian word from nomads is Sutu, which occurs in a few Armana letters. Seeing the Shashu as nomads of Palestine, we have to reckon the fact that many of them settled in the Central Hill country in the period around after 1200 BCE. This is from Gostia Ostrom. Okay. This is a representation of Shashu from the highlands of Mesopotamia. So here are the mountains that they were talking about earlier, right? This is a topographical map of Judea and Samaria, right, in the mountainous regions of Jerusalem, right? So the green area is flat land, and the raised up area there, these are the mountainous areas, right? And this is another topographical map showing you the layout of Israel, right? So understanding the Exodus story is complete crap. Other biblical archaeologists come up with theories that the Hebrews were a group that evolved from the land, specifically the highland areas of ancient Syria, Mesopotamia, modern day Israel. Now we can understand the teachings of Mary Kare. But as concerned the foreigners, let this be said. The vile Asiatic is miserable because of the place he is in. Shortage of water, lack of many trees, and paths thereof difficult because of the mountains. We just saw the mountains. It's very difficult. He has never settled in one place. Plagued by want, he wanders the desert on foot. He has been fighting ever since the time of Horus. He neither conquers nor can be conquered. He does not announce the day of fighting, but is like a thief whom society has expelled. Guerrilla warfare. That's what the teachings of Mary Kyrie was about. So here is a ancient Israelite highland settlement. This is in Samaria. This is the so-called Canaanite four-walled room. Here is Tel Etan, which is a 6 hectares mound in Israel's lowland at the edge of the valley, which separates the lowlands from the Judean highlands. Usually, people identify this city with the biblical Eglon, and is situated near the important junction on the north-south road and the meandered along. I gotta get a source for this. Here is the Shiloh site of ancient Mesopotamia. There's a bunch of stones. This is crazy. There's a bunch of stones put up on one another, right? This is the Shiloh site. All right. So there's two types of theories that relate to people who become Israel come from the land of Mesopotamia. There's a peaceful infiltration theory, then there's internal nomadism, right? Impressed archaeologists with the continuity between lowland urban Canaanite and highland village Israelite culture, especially in regards to pottery, farming techniques, tools, building, construction. The peaceful nature of the villages became evident. They were located far from potential enemies and without any wall defense. Some were too far west to have been settled by people from outside the land, and the rapid population and growth implied that people moved up from the lowlands into the islands. So people are moving up into these highland cities, right? It must be said that they were just a group of people in the land that decided to separate themselves from the rest. So, so this model proposed that people increased in numbers and expanded into the lowlands and came into conflict with others in the area, right? Originally, these people considered themselves Mesopotamians and only gradually came to consider themselves as Israelites as separate from the people around them. So, as they were moving into the highlands, they came into contact, right? No other God's peaceful infiltration model. This is the book. Essentially, these highland settlers moved from places of high conflict to areas of low conflict. In these areas, they could grow and develop. This is what led to the rapid expansion of these areas. Here is the internal revolution model, right? Poor Mesopotamians revolted against the Egyptian rule and fled to the highland. This makes a lot of sense in reference to what was going on at the time, the political situation of that area, right? These poor people combined with the Aparu of the area and agreed to worship Yahweh. This new society gained control of the region and established the Israelite kingdom. This is the internal revolution model. Hold on one second. All right. According to Gosta Ostrom, Canaanites withdrew from the lowlands due to violence perpetuated by the Egyptians and the Sea Peoples. The name Israel reflects this movement since it is built upon the divine name of El, a Canaanite god. Culturally, Israelites had great continuity with the Canaanites, whereas typically nomads would not acculturate so quickly and thoroughly. So, De Goose concludes that the Israelites were ethnically united, sedentary highlanders who used tribal nomenclature. They were called Apru in the Amarna correspondence. Israelite culture in the Negev demonstrates a long period of contact with Canaanite culture. The Israelite four-room house was the evolutionary culmination of an architectural form from Canaan. Essentially, Israelites were Mesopotamians that broke off as a separate group. They migrated into the land in the 15th to 14th century, and they may be the Aparu and the Shashu in the Egyptian reports. Mesopotamian nomads settled the highlands, gained in population, engaged in warfare with the people of the lowland area. Basically, homeless Mesopotamians settled the highland areas in Israel. So let's recap. The Moses Exodus story is done unless you like eating chocolate Easter bunny eggs and all that stuff. The Habru, Apru, and Shashu were nomadic warlike people in the region of Mesopotamia. The highland Mesopotamian Canaanite region suggests these sites and sites of people that develop into Israel. That can we don't have to get into the origins of the Israelites, who they actually are. All right, I'm gonna chill out right there. All right, so was that? Man, yo, man, that's only half the presentation. I'm already an hour and 15 in. I think that's good enough. That's good. That's the part I wanted to recap and see how it was. Yo, thanks for checking this part out. If you hung with me this long, I appreciate you. Hit that like button. I'm gonna start coming on, doing some more conversations. But peace and blessings.